Welcome to Friends of the Fog, a production of The Fog and the Whirlwind. I'm Josh, your host, and joining me today is Samuel the Gunsmith. Wanted to bring him on to talk to you guys about some of the things that are going on regarding gun rights. It's an issue that's taken a back seat for a while. A lot of people are talking about immigration and spending cuts and Doge and everything going on between Trump and Elon, the riots going on in Los Angeles, and other things like that, especially Iran and the Middle East. But the back seat, there in the back seat, is the Second Amendment. That's not how it should be. It was very important, especially during everything going on with COVID-19, that the American people had a right to defend themselves. It was a big reason why the government crackdown only came so far, because of an armed populace, people who were able to stand up for themselves. And the unfortunate thing about it is because it's taken so much of a back seat, unfortunately, the Republican Party especially is all on defense. It's time for us to go on offense and actually start doing something, making sure that we all have the right to defend ourselves, especially in an increasingly dangerous country. That's something that the Los Angeles riots have shown, is that it's important that you're able to defend yourself, which is what the founders intended whenever they put the Second Amendment in our Bill of Rights. Joining me today, back on the program, he's been here before, is Samuel. Welcome back, man.
Hey, what's up?
So I wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about the big, beautiful bill, the one big, beautiful bill. As we were talking about a little bit in the prep for today's episode, there is some of this bill that talks about the NFA, and you were just talking about how the Senate has rejected some of the spending cuts. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah, so the first one was the HPA, the Hearing Protection Act. That one passed first. What that does is it deregulates silencers, suppressors, whichever terminology you want to refer to them, takes them off the NFA. What that means is you can walk into your gun store, pick out a suppressor for whatever gun. You can pick out multiple ones, do a 4473 like you do with every normal gun purchase, and you walk out the door as soon as you get the approval. It prevents the... Basically, without it, it's an NFA item. So you have to pay $200 extra to the ATF. It's called a tax stamp, but it's really a donation to the ATF. That money goes directly to the ATF. It doesn't go to any other branch, doesn't go to any like normal taxes. It goes straight to the ATF to do with whatever they feel like. Then you got a 9 to 12 month on average waiting period. Now, there's some people that from certain states have been waiting for multiple years before they get their approval to own a suppressor, which if you look at the prices of suppressors, they're kind of expensive already depending on which one you're going to get. You're looking at a good one is around $800 to like $1,500 depending on the brand. So you're adding another $200 to that. Plus, you're having to wait 9 to 12 months on average. Usually, you're waiting more than a year to be able to actually go and pick one up. So, a gun store has to hold that. You have to, and the other thing people don't realize, you have to turn over your fingerprints. You have to turn over your passport picture. And you basically are giving the ATF the right to show up at your door without a warrant, without telling you they're coming, to do a search on your premises, whether they approve you or not. And that's on file forever. Those that fingerprint card, that photo ID, that the paperwork and everything for the Form 1, that stays in the ATF forever. So they can raid your house. They can show up at your door whenever they feel like it. Same thing with the SHORE Act, which is stop harassment of rifle owners? Yeah, Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today Act. That's what SHORT stands for. It's the same thing, except instead of a suppressor, it's a rifle upper with a barrel shorter than 60 inches. So it could be 13.5, it could be 14, it could be 15. Somehow, arbitrarily in the 1930s, Congress said 16 inches, that's legal. Go to your gun store, fill out a 4473, walk out same day with it, depending on if you get approved. Somehow an inch below that and further somehow is concealable to the point where it's not a rifle. That was illegal. That's what the NFA was passed in 1930 in response to gangland violence in Chicago, New York, New Jersey, It really came out after the Chicago Valentine's Day massacre with Al Capone's big move against the other organized crime families. They used short-barreled Thompson submachine guns. So the ATF, the NFA was passed to regulate those things. Then they added suppressors to it because originally it came out it was just about machine guns. It was about submachine guns and machine guns. Then they added short-barreled rifles to it. They added short-barreled shotguns to it, which that's what caused Ruby Ridge. They told the guy was a gunsmith. The guy that owned Ruby Ridge was a gunsmith. 2 undercover ATF agents show up at his shop. They basically berate him and pressure him into cutting down a shotgun to, I can't remember what that, I think it went from the 16-inch standard to he cut it down to like 10 and a half or something like that. Then the FBI, HRT, which is hostage rescue, no idea why they were on that mission with the ATF to begin with. That's not their mission. That's not what they're there for. That's not what HRT is supposed to do. ATF show up on his property, kill his dog. Then they shoot the son because he was going to shoot at them because you got guys in black on your property who just killed your dog. So they kill his son. They ended up in an armed standoff. Wife walks out on the, front porch with a baby. They shoot her. Nothing ever happened about that. But yeah, that's your NFA. That's what encompasses the NFA. They added all that stuff to it over the years. Congress can stop it. They can vote to repeal it. They will not. We've been debating this for over 30 years, basically, as Second Amendment stuff. So they're finally putting acts in, the HPA and the Short Act, which are basically deregulating short barrel rifles and suppressors. So you can go into your gun store, buy them like normal, pass a background check, it's yours. You're not having to pay an extra $200. You're not having to wait over a year to get approval. You're basically not surrendering your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. Because that's what people don't realize. Not only is the NFA a violation of the Second Amendment, but having to go through the Form 1 paperwork with the ATF surrenders your Fourth and Fifth rights. Mainly your Fourth, but it can impede your Fifth Amendment because there's been cases in court where they've used your Form 1 paperwork against you and basically said you can't invoke Fifth Amendment right to not self-incriminate because they're like, well, you signed the Form 1 paperwork. We have your paperwork, so you're guilty of owning this item. We know you have this item. You can't use the Fifth against whatever. But the main thing is the Fourth. They're violating the Second, and then they take away your Fourth Amendment rights because they don't need anything to basically go and take it. And that's what they were trying to add the FTRs, the force reset triggers. They were trying to add those to the NFA about 2-3 years ago during COVID, which basically an FDR mimics a full auto sear. It basically allows the gun to shoot multiple rounds faster than just bang, reset, bang, reset. They were trying to add those to the NFA. That never passed, thankfully. But
Why?
there's been... Well, because for one, only like one bill was submitted with FTRs listed on it, and Congress turned that bill down because the ATF could not prove that the force reset triggers were actually making machine guns. But they also got caught with their hands in the cookie jar because there's a case actually from Tennessee where the ATF showed up to a gun store and basically demanded access to the 4473 paperwork without a warrant, looking for short barrel rifles, looking for FTRs. There's been a case in our state, down either in Charleston or Columbia, 3 armed body armor, level 4 plates, full kit, showed up at this guy's house looking for his FTR. He had bought a rare breed forced reset trigger for his AR, and I think it had been like 4 months since he bought it, and they showed up at his house like, we know you have this. There's the door. This is why everybody should have a doorbell camera at this point. He released, you can find it on YouTube, he released the footage of his doorbell camera of them banging on his door, and when he asked who they were, they're like, we're the ATF. We know you just bought a rare breed forced reset trigger. We're here to take your trigger. If you do not give us your trigger, you're going to jail. They did not have a warrant. FTRs are not illegal. He did not violate any NFA rules. He did not violate any other ATF things. He did not break any rules of owning a trigger.
So they're basically just trying to intimidate him, is what it sounds like. It sounds like he was not
Yeah.
breaking the law, but they were trying to make it sound like he was and intimidate him, and it doesn't sound like it worked, correct?
They did, yeah. They did this. It's the force reset triggers, binary triggers were the same. They did the same thing, and then around the same time, it kind of got buried because they had two incidences where they got caught and they stopped it. But oil filters or oil solvent traps, not oil filters, solvent traps. Basically, it's a little device you can screw on to anything with threads, and you could put oil through the other end, solvent, cleaning things like that, and it traps it. So it's an easy way to clean a rifle. Take your muzzle brake or anything off, screw that on in place of it, run your cleaning rod and your solvents and your cleaning stuff, and you don't have to worry about it falling onto your floor. You don't have to have a cleaning mat. The solvent trap captures it, unscrew it, dump it out, clean it. But what they found out, because people were stupid and post stuff on the internet they should not post on the internet, people were posting videos of them attaching solvent traps to their rifles and shooting them. And solvent traps, depending on which one you bought and modifications you can make to them, can act as temporary suppressors. Do they last? No. They're good for like 1 to 2 shots, and then there's no suppression. But that got on the ATF's radar, so they started raiding people's homes for solvent traps. They started monitoring purchases of solvent traps. Your credit card companies started monitoring purchases, because technically a credit card company is only supposed to see spent this amount of money Amazon Marketplace. It's not supposed to see, they're not supposed to be able to see what you actually bought. They're just supposed to see so and so just charged $20 Amazon Marketplace. And then it processes, it gets put on the card, you pay it off. That's how a credit card's supposed to work. Discover, which I have, Visa, and I think MasterCard was the other one. They all started monitoring purchases and were starting to trace them back to gun stores. They were trying to figure out what category on Amazon you were buying from. All sorts of, they had lists of all the different firearm dealers that you could buy online. You could buy parts and stuff online. So like Optics Planet, Academy, any of the places you can buy gun-related stuff. Palmetto State Armory's website. So they started monitoring that. That got shut down. And it's just, that's what caused the HBA and the Short Act to actually finally be pushed by the grassroots conservative movement in the Senate and the House, is because those hearings got buried because, magically bigger news stories would happen whenever ATF had to go in front of Congress and the committees to explain why you're doing this, why you're showing up people's houses, why do you not have warrants, why are you taking pictures of people's 4473s at gun stores and then showing up at their house to demand they turn over stuff or else they're going to jail. But those hearings didn't get media coverage. They would get buried due to bigger news stories, which is kind of why I was, not surprised at the timing of the LA stuff, because what has that taken from the news cycle? The big beautiful bill. It has taken the news cycle away from talking about the HBA, the Short Act getting added to it 2 weeks ago, because they tried to bury the Short Act. Like the Democrats tried to bury that. They tried to prevent it being added to this bill and say that it had to go through the next cycle, which would have been after they take their 3 or 4 month vacation, which again, why do they get a longer vacation than what we get from work? Like, I have to save up my vacation time to be able to take a week off and it's all gone, but they get to take 3 to 4 months off and then reconvene in like December.
Yeah, real quickly, I think you made several amazing points. I want to talk for a second. In a second, I want to bring up something else quickly. But you mentioned, it sounds like we've got credit card companies colluding, and Amazon too, it sounds like, with our government, especially like the ATF, as far as monitoring what American citizens are doing, which sounds extremely unconstitutional if we have the right to privacy. But then the other thing that you brought up is the way that the news cycle works. I mean, you're right, because it's even changed from LA. It went from the big beautiful bill, the one big beautiful bill, OBBB, to everything going on in LA. And now what is it? Iran, we're going to go to war in Iran. The world is coming to an end. And it's funny because the chances of this one big beautiful bill being forced through Congress without anyone really taking a good hard look at it has gone up because of the way the media is being manipulated. And it goes to show, I remember I've had this Canadian guy, Endeavor, he's a political commentator. I've had him on 3 times at this point, and he's pointed out this news cycle is really weird. It's highly manipulated. Like right about the time of Ghislaine Maxwell being brought out on trial, they were running other big stories. It's a bunch of manipulation and distraction. So I agree with you completely, and I hate to cut you off, but let's just dwell on this for a second. Is this the claim that you're making? And again, I know you can back this up. Is that these credit card companies and Amazon itself, are they working with the ATF or the DOJ, or who are they coordinating with?
All of them. And again, they stopped it because they got caught. They got away with this during COVID because everybody was buying stuff, more online during COVID. So it was easier to manipulate. It was easier to trace back your purchases and figure out where you're purchasing from. But they got caught. Once COVID ended and we kind of got pseudo back to normal, Congress and, the House of Representatives and stuff, that just local judicial stuff went back to normal for the most part when it came to hearings, court cases, everything went back to pseudo normal running for the government. And that's when these lawsuits started coming out. That's when people started going to court for the ATF started bringing some stuff to court. Other people, it gotten mainly we can thank the fact that we still have YouTube. The fact that, and the fact that Twitter is no longer owned by, super left-leaning liberal person for the most part. I don't fully trust Musk when it comes to how conservative he is, but I do feel like he's like Bill Maher. I feel like he's more of a classical liberal where it's like, I don't fully agree with conservatism, but I'm not so far left that I want to tell you can't think like that unless you're a bad guy. And that's what, all this stuff started coming on, Twitter, X, YouTube. There's a ton of YouTube videos. And honestly, there's more channels that are focusing more on bringing up those kind of stories versus just doing straight gun-related news. Like, oh, here's this new gun that Company A is putting out. Check out what was at SHOT Show. Here's what was at this other gun. You have more YouTube channels that are like, here's what just happened. Here's how it affects you. We got Colion Noir. He's the biggest like lawyer activist on YouTube and Instagram for gun-related content. You got Mr. Guns and Gear, who is completely kind of went away from gear testing to the point of just doing news cycles about gun-related news cases now. There's 2A News, and there's a bunch of others. And Brandon Herrera. Brandon Herrera, he has just shot up thanks to, he moved out of North Carolina, moved to Texas, and that got people's attention. And now, he ran for, a congressional seat. He ran against Tony Gonzalez, the Uvalde area area of Texas after that, disastrous school shooting that we all know now, yet again, Freedom of Information Acts and YouTube, we all got to see that hour-and-a-half long recording from the security camera of that school of responding police officers staging in that hallway and doing nothing. They stood there like a bunch of sissies in full tack gear, afraid of one dude with one rifle, and I think he had a handgun, but I know he had a rifle. A rifle was what he was spotted with. I'm sorry, you have level 4+ plates. You tell us we can't own those. They've tried to regulate us having even level 3A body armor. Nancy Pelosi and a bunch of other people tried to push in an anti-body armor bill. That thankfully got shot down, although New Jersey just passed something, I think, last year, but I think it got struck down pretty quickly. But they passed a law in New Jersey after the, the Onion Festival shooting? I think that's what it was, where the dude had... No, it wasn't Onion Festival. The Walmart. You remember the Walmart shooting last year or so, right?
Yes.
That dude had level 3 armor plates on. So New Jersey not only tried to sue the body armor manufacturer, they tried to put in a bill that basically said if you're a civilian, if you do not have law enforcement, military, government agency, whatever, attached to your name, whether you're former or current, you cannot own body armor. That got struck down, thankfully. That also disappeared from the news cycle very, very quickly because a lot of, Spartan Armory, Bulldog Armory, um, a couple other, we have a lot of, body armor manufacturers in the United States now. It's becoming very, very much more affordable than it used to be. Used to anything that was stamped as mil-spec, military, law enforcement, it cost a couple grand to get it as a civilian because it was very niche, very regulated. Now that we've had several body armor manufacturers take off in the United States, you can get decent body armor for under $300. I got my Spartan Armory kit for $250 on a sale like 4 or 5 years ago. I need to swap the plates out. I got steel plates. I need to get some composite plates for it because they're a little bit better. But even those, like composite plates, used to be like $2,000 a pop because it's half steel, half ceramic. And ceramic's a very expensive material still to work with for the most part. You can get composite plates for about $800 in a set, and you're good. Those have a good. Those will last a long time as long as you're not abusing them. But again, it was yet another just niche thing that all of a sudden it's like they want to ban it, they want to put more regulation on it, and then it gets killed, and again it disappears from the news cycle. Something else bigger happens that takes away from it. It's wild. Like these like post-COVID gun stuff has been crazy with what's been exposed, what's been covered up, what has been pushed, and what they've been, what they've gone after. Then it's like they get pushback and then they drop it. They pushed back on FDRs. They got some lawsuits on that, dropped it. Body armor, that was in the news cycle for a couple months after that one shooting up in New Jersey. That disappeared after they got pushback on that. Now we're on the HBA and the Short Act. They're not getting, they've been trying to get rid of it. It's still in the bill, but what do we see? They're moving on from it. So like Fox News isn't really talking about it anymore. CNN was bashing it for a little bit. They've dropped it completely. All they can focus on is LA and abusive rights in LA. How dare the military be called in to to LA. Now we're on the we're on the news cycle with Iran. That's all anybody can. That's literally ever since the airstrike. That's all my Instagram feed has been. Mainly Christians bickering back and forth about whether we're supposed to war. And it's like, wow.
All right, hold on. Hold on. All right, I think you're back. It warbled out real bad. Just repeat everything you said. For some reason, the connection was weak.
What's the last thing you heard?
You said something to the effect of, ever since the strikes, everything on your Instagram feed.
Yeah. Ever since the airstrike from Israel and then the retaliation by Iran, that's all my Instagram feed has been. Mainly Christians bickering with each other over the verse in Genesis about bless ye Israel, you'll be cursed. And it's like that's all that pops up on my Instagram feed. It's like there's nothing about the bill. There's nothing about LA. That's pretty much disappeared from my Instagram cycle, surprisingly. That's all. And of course, the Tucker Carlson Ted Cruz interview. That's been making the cycle on Instagram and YouTube too.
Well, big tech is working with the mainstream media. I think you know it, and I know it.
Well, that's what I was saying. It's like, as a kid, we were told by the older generation, especially during the global war on terror, which you and I grew up, we're post 9/11 kids. We were alive for 9/11, but we weren't old enough to remember it happening. We grew up with the people talking about it and remembering it, watching a 20+ year war on terror in the Middle East happen with, we're sitting here as kids, we're like, ooh, I can't wait to get old enough to fight. And then you get in your teenage years and you're like, no, we need to get out of there.
Yep.
I've met so many guys, especially in college, I've met so many guys that have served, who've had people in their family serve. And I've never thought I'd see a nihilistic viewpoint on armed service because we're the most patriotic country in the world. We have the best stuff, the best military. We will go out and willingly do anything for anybody else that needs help. Not anymore. People are going to find out with these boomers. I hate using that term, but it is these boomers. These post Vietnam, Korea War era people, which is very surprising that they're calling for war when half of those people were the hippies that were getting arrested at colleges, abusing and attacking National Guard recruitment offices, Marine recruiting offices, Army recruiting offices. Those were the heavy anti-war people when we were fighting the communists.
Yeah, and then they were abusing. They were abusing our troops when they got home too.
Yeah. We're talking about we're talking about people that probably spit on Marines and Army personnel when they arrived back home at the airports.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they want us to go to war again in the desert. They want us to keep fighting in the desert. But when we were in a war that we actually had business fighting because we went there as guests of the Vietnam people. We went there to be military advisors and military advisors only. Terroristic Viet Cong people snuck onto our base, killed 15 of our non-combatant military advisors who were not fighting. They were not killing Vietnamese. They were simply training the ARVN to protect their country. They get killed by militant insurgents who basically are like, we will have one Vietnam and it will be under communist dictatorship. Granted that some of the stuff that happened in Vietnam was shouldn't have done. We fought a very bad war, but it was a war of attrition, so it's not really, you're not there for territories. Like people don't seem to understand that we went from war of territory, World War I, World War II. It was about how much territory you took back from the enemy and held, versus Vietnam, Korea, and now the global war on terror, a war of attritions, where it's like, I may lose 20,000 of my people, but I killed 50,000 plus of you, so I'm still the victor because I wiped out more of you than what you killed of me. And people also forget, they signed the peace treaty in 1970. 5 years later, they roll their tanks in and take over Saigon very peacefully because Congress basically said, well, we made promises to keep, funding the, South Vietnamese military, but you know what? We're sick of war. We're gonna focus on, stuff here, so we're not gonna send those funds out. So, underfunded military. It was a military that was basically embedded with Viet Cong sympathizers at that point. So we just, we got all our people out. No more Americans were killed in Vietnam, but they took it over. And if you actually look at the country now versus then, and we'll actually look at it when we pulled out, they almost went bankrupt. We pulled American businesses out of there. We pulled Americans out of Vietnam. The country almost went bankrupt when it first turned communistic. They are now a pseudo-communistic, democratic, country now because they almost killed their economy with communism. Same thing with Korea, with North Korea. Look at their situation. But we're going to focus on the Middle East. For some reason, oil. But we've never, you and I've never seen oil. We're still paying $2.50 to $3 a gallon of gas. But we got to go fight in the Middle East again. And not only are we fighting, they're wanting us to fight in the Middle East. It's the second biggest importer and exporter of oil. Saudi Arabia is the number one in the Middle East. Iran's the number two. We've yet to ever have a conflict with Saudi Arabia, even though they funded Al-Qaeda. They funded the people that attacked us on 9/11. Bin Laden was on the board of multiple companies in Saudi Arabia. His dad was one of the richest people in Saudi Arabia. But we ended up fighting in Iraq. We ended up fighting in Afghanistan. As an adult, it makes no sense to me. And then to go even further, go do a deep dive on YouTube. You can find an old clip of our supposed best friend in the Middle East, Benjamin Netanyahu, telling us that if we topple Saddam Hussein, the Middle East is going to be a paradise. It's not. It is the most destabilized region in the entire world. Africa makes it like they make Africa look sane. Africa still has some of the worst like tribalistic warfare going on. Somalia is a failed state ever since the Black Hawk Down incident. There's multiple areas in Africa that are basically not even third world countries, they're fourth world countries. They're so poor. But we got to go fight in the desert again.
It's funny that you say that in terms of fourth world countries, not even third world, because usually third world are also now called on the politically correct term developing nations. And what you're saying is, well, show me the development. Like, it's not even developing.
Well, go on. Like, all you got to do is go on YouTube and look up Mr. Beast water wells. He built those things within like a year, left technicians there to help show the populace how to maintain them. They've already taken them apart and scrapped them.
Right.
So it's like, what else are you supposed to do to help these tribes, people that aren't, living in big, these big urban environments that, they're living very rural compared to what we have with our cities, our big, our rural areas are still nowhere rural compared to some of these countries out in Africa, Middle East, and even South America makes Africa is better off than Africa. Brazil's still one of the poorest countries in the world, and they live in favelas for the most part, which are interconnected shacks that are apartments. They're really shacks. They got 10 roofs and everything. But then you go to the tourist areas, and it's like very well developed. You go to Rio de Janeiro and stay near the beach areas, hotels galore, shops, restaurants, but you go further into Brazil, it's not the same. Mexico. You stay in the tourist areas of Mexico, it's beautiful. Great places, friendly people. But you go to the actual like Mexican areas, like where the actual people are, it's terrible. And all of them have very, very much the same things in common. Corrupt government, cartels, drugs. So if we're going to spend our time fighting outside of America, I think I'd rather go help our neighbors down in the, below the border. I'd rather fight the cartels than go fight in the desert. And most of my guys that I know that are former military, that are, they would put on the uniform again if they needed to, they want to go fight the cartels. Because that is the most important. It's like, I'm not going to go fight for a nation state that basically has demanded that, well, we're Jewish, so you have to protect us because you're the United States of America. You exist only for us. That's literally what Ted Cruz said in his interview with Tucker Carlson, was that America is basically only around to protect the interest of Israel. That guy needs to be impeached. Like Ted Cruz needs to be immediately taken out of office. Because that's
it was a very revealing. Yeah, it was a very revealing conversation. Pivoting slightly, I think it's interesting because there's actually a lot of talk about this back in the 2024 election. I think DeSantis brought it up in terms of what you just said about fighting cartels. It sounds like to me, and I want to make sure that we're clear, that you favor at least some amount of military intervention in either Mexico or Central America in terms of fighting the cartels. I've had the position that we need to fight the cartels within the continental United States a lot harder, definitely, but I don't know if I favor going into either Mexico or into Central America, because to me, it's not that I think, oh, that's racist or colonialist. It's like, no, I don't think we need to be solving their problems for them. I really think that we basically need to say to them, hey, fix your mess. We're not going to fix your mess for you. We are going to fix our mess. We're going to defend our border and fight this war within our border. And maybe you agree with that, but again, I want to be clear. So do you favor intervening in any capacity outside of the United States and Mexico or Central America? And if so, why?
I do, but it's mainly because if you trace back a lot of the cartels and how big they've gotten over the years, it's our fault. Like, not Americans' fault, it's our government's fault. Look at the 60s. Look at the amount of CIA that went down to Mexico and gave them, helped them build up their drug empires in return for money that was being laundered to fund our CIA operations in Vietnam. So it's like, in my opinion, a lot of the problems we have in other countries, our government has kind of helped create. They
Sure.
were there. I'm not saying that we created the cartels on purpose. I'm saying they were there, but they wouldn't be as big as they are now if our government hadn't been using them to get what they wanted. The CIA and the FBI are the biggest problems in our government. We've got we have corrupt local officials, corrupt officials that in the Senate and the House. But if we were to terminate the NSA, if we were to terminate the FBI and terminate the CIA now and rebuild them, or just find a new way to go with we have military intelligence. Why do we need four different branches of intelligence? We have Department of Homeland Security, we have the CIA, we have the FBI, and then you have the Joint Chiefs of Staff, just regular like naval intelligence, army intelligence. Why do we need 4 to 6 different branches of intelligence when they could all be under one big department and able to do everything? Because the whole thing is the FBI is only able to operate within the continental United States, and the CIA is only allowed to operate outside the United States. They both don't stick to that. The FBI operates with Interpol outside of the United States jurisdiction on multiple accounts. The CIA operates all the time inside the continental United States. They just cover it up, or they pretend to be they say it's a Homeland Security operation. They say it's an FBI operation. No, it's a joint operation with the CIA, and there's CIA officers embedded with the FBI and the DHS people.
They're inside the state governments. I'm not a big fan at all of Jesse Ventura. I used to be. I look back and I cringe. But one thing he said shortly after becoming a governor is that when he was governor of Minnesota, there was a CIA employee that he was informed about and was told, oh, by the way, yeah, you can't fire him. And he was like, I'm the governor of the state. What are you talking about? They said, no, he's unfireable. He reports back to Langley, and that's a complete no-go. So think about that, people. Think about that there is someone in your state, whether it's in South Carolina, Texas, California, wherever, they work for the CIA and they report back to someone in Langley. And for reasons we don't really understand or know about, but they should be accountable to the American people, and that's a problem. So yeah, I agree with you. They're operating within the United States, which is not supposed to be their territory. So you're right.
And not only that, it's like look at what they've interfered with.
Right.
Look a couple years, about 10, 13 years ago, 12 years ago, Benghazi, 2013. What made that escalate into a worse situation? The CIA station chief not allowing our assets to go in and help our ambassador. Our ambassador was basically killed by his own government because they were so afraid of a CIA base being discovered in that country that they wouldn't send highly trained special forces guys to go take out these guys, get our ambassador out of there, get him back to our CIA headquarters, and extract everybody. That was the biggest government failure of modern history outside of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. But before the withdrawal from Afghanistan, our biggest flop as as military and spycraft was Benghazi. That was a 13-hour firefight that didn't have to happen if we had had better response. But the whole idea was we can't be exposed as having a CIA base in this country. We got to use local assets. Well, the local assets don't trust you. The local assets are only there to make money. So if they have somebody else that's willing to pay them more money not to get involved, they're not going to get involved.
Well, to reverse slightly, I understand your point. Basically, the mindset is, well, if the CIA created these problems with the cartels, we should have some amount of responsibility in handling it and or fixing it. Or maybe the position is that these countries can't fix it. They're too corrupt. But my problem is it feels like whenever the United States military, the United States government gets involved in a foreign country, it always has unintended consequences. And I would worry that if we were to intervene in Mexico or Central America, it would make a bad problem worse. I'll give you the last word on it, and then we'll move on to talking more about Trump and the GOP.
So I don't want like full on like military invasion. My idea would basically be drop a couple of Delta boys, drop some Navy SEALs, drop some Green Berets, have them as a task force embedded within the military, the Mexican special forces that we can trust, and clear out the cartel that way, and then let the hopefully the people will finally be able to vote out these corrupt bought for politicians, because a lot of it is politicians are paid off or they're scared because they're basically like, well, I don't want to do this, but if I don't do it, the cartel's going to show up. They're going to kill my family and leave me alive. And then if I don't do what they say again, they're just going to come and finish me off anyway. Or they're just going to straight up kill your entire bloodline, because that's what's happened in Mexico. Regular police officers in Mexico can't have their faces seen half the time in some of these areas that they're involved with. They can't live in the same areas. It's like you could have an officer 3 hours down at the border with Panama and Mexico, but he lives all the way at the top when he's not on duty because he's so scared of how deep the corruption, how deep the cartel involvement is. You can't do anything in those countries without the cartel knows you're there. Like, even if you're an American citizen, they know who you are. Like, the cartel's going to have at least 4 people keeping track of you and see what you're doing even if you're a tourist. Because if you're someone who's important, you're either going to be extorted for protection money, or you're going to be snatched up and and used for leverage to get money. And we've already had the president of Mexico basically calling for an invasion of California. You have Mexican politicians holding up a map of of North America from 1839, before the 1844 Treaty of Guadalupe Geraldo, where Mexico turned over the land, and we paid over $70 million for that land too. We didn't have to pay that. We beat them in a war, and we could have basically said, sign the treaty, we'll give you Santa Ana, you'll get all your people back, but we get the territory. We still gave them $70 million, which I have yet to look up what that would be in today's money with inflation. That was $70 million in 1844. We're talking about a couple billion, couple trillion into, if you add inflation in today's value. So, yeah, you got foreign officials calling for an invasion of California, an invasion of the border states, because they're indoctrinating these 20-something-year-old kids to believe that it's still somehow Mexican territory and that somehow it's their birthright to live there, even, no matter what. Like, we saw that group of people, and there's the video on YouTube, Instagram, everything, of those groups of 20-something-year-old Latina kids basically saying, this is Mexico, this is our land, we're going to fight you. I'm like, I don't know who taught you that, because no, that land hasn't been Mexico's for 172 years. And it wasn't even Mexican. You guys only had the territory for 2.5 years after you beat the Spanish. Technically, Mexico was New Spania. Yeah. And then you guys fought they fought their rebellion against the Spanish army. They had it for 2.5 years, 3 years. Then, Texas, the Americans in Texas were being abused by Santa Anna and his, corrupt Mexican government. So they fought back. They were an independent state. Then they became a member of the United States after the end of the Mexican-American War in 1844.
Right.
So you look at it, it's like the United States and Mexico and a lot of South America all have the same problems. Huge amount of corruption in the government and the agencies that are supposed to protect them. And if we don't start finding ways to work together and get rid of this corruption, we're all going to end up either at war with each other anyway, or we're going to end up folded under somebody else's umbrella. And it's going to be, 1989, George Orwell's book, or something 84. Worse. 84, yeah, 84. Came out in 1989.
Yeah, you're right. Well, so let's take this a second here. It says I have a weak internet connection. Give me a minute.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with mine.
It's okay. We're just going to give it a second here.
It doesn't like our offices area, apparently.
I guess not. Okay, I think it's working. To shift gears, talking about corruption in politics, if you were to guess or predict what's going to end up happening with the OBBB, how do you see this going down? In other words, if you were to look ahead to July the 4th, what kind of a bill do you think is going to be on Trump's desk?
I'm scared that it's going to give us what we want, but it's going to have so much crap in it that we're not going to know about until it's too late. You already got people talking about, I got to look into it, but apparently there's 2 provisions in the bill that's going to allow the government to sell off, public land, which could be a good thing, could not be a good thing. Like, it could allow people to buy the land, develop it, and keep it as a nature preserve without our tax dollars being used to protect it. Or on the on the other end, you could have these big developers who don't even live in these states snatching up this land for cheap, and next thing you know, they're tearing it down, and we got more condos, we got more casinos, we got more hotels, we got more, you know, cheap housing, or supposedly cheap housing. Like, housing's not cheap, but they cheap out on the design of it. These townhomes are ridiculous, man. But yeah, I got to look into that one because that's been popping up more and more on my Instagram feed about the bill. The other thing I'm worried about is I am so worried that they're going to somehow push more spending to Ukraine and especially more funding to Israel.
Well, I
Because they're,
agree. I think that there's going to be some really good stuff in it. From what I've heard, there's about $150 billion that's going to go to the border, which is a good thing
yeah,
because Trump, back in his first term, was talking to Schumer and Pelosi like, just give me 13 billion, give me 9 billion, something for the wall, something for ICE. He gets $150 billion, over 10
yeah,
times what he was asking for. They're going to be sitting pretty well for the remainder of his term. And so they can deport some people out of here if they use that money properly. Now, that's the question. Will they have oversight to actually do things properly? But I agree. I feel like there's going to be a lot of good stuff here, but there's also going to be some bad. And it's sad. Unfortunately, there's an element of political realism there. Congress is so bad. You kind of have to put some pork in there. I don't like it. I'm not saying it's how it should be. I'd like to trim as much pork out of it as possible, which is kind of what Massey and Rand Paul's point is. And I hear them. I do. I've been very careful not to criticize them too harshly because they're taking a principled stance, and I can respect that. And I've said on my podcast before, what I have less respect for are the Republicans who are saying they're against it now, and they weren't against the crazy $2.2 trillion stimulus package back in 2020. Whereas Massey and Paul were against that too. They also said,
yeah.
this is ridiculous. We shouldn't be doing that. They've been consistent. It's the inconsistent Republicans that I give a hard time because, like, well, if you didn't care back then, why do you pretend to care now? But I tend to agree with you. How do you see the leadership of John Thune? What do you think of him?
Well, I think this bill's definitely going to be the tipping point on how he is. Like, you could have any opinion about whether he's good or bad right now. This bill and what's in this bill, what's getting added to this bill, what's getting taken out of this bill is really going to, this bill and what's in it, what's being taken out, what's being put in it, this is going to define the next 4 years, probably the next 8 years, if we're being honest. And it's really going to come down to if there is, the way the spending is now, if it's passed the way it is now, we get two wins out of it. For me as a 2A person, we get two wins. We're getting the HBA, we're getting the Short Act. The downfall to having those is we're going to see more and more state regulation on these items. Because for right now, the states can't ban them. Because it's a Form 1 item, it's the ATF, you got to go through all that paperwork. So the Democratic states are like, yeah, you can still have it because you're doing all your paperwork. We can show up at your doorstep with the ATF and deal with you if we want to. Whereas now, with it being a regular item like a handgun, a rifle, that stuff, and you just passed the 4473, we're already seeing states like California, New Jersey, New York, Delaware, and Chicago. They're already preemptively putting bills into place that are like suppressors are illegal, short rifle, barrels over, shorter than 60 inches are going to be illegal. If you own the item under a Form 1, you're not going to be grandfathered in a lot of these states too. That's the other thing people aren't paying attention to is typically when something's passed that bans something, usually the items that have already been legally owned, they're grandfathered in. We saw it with the 60s and 90s assault weapons bans. They were grandfathering in people that had the M16s and stuff like that from their grandpappy and uncle. But no, we're not seeing that now. They're removing the grandfathering in. And the ATF tried to do it too when they were trying to change the rules with short barrel rifles a couple years ago. Again, all during COVID, and nobody's talking about this anymore because it got buried. When the ATF, had leadership change, a lot of these rules got buried because the new head, finally said, no, we can't do that. And Congress basically told them, no, you couldn't do that. Like, how embarrassing does it have to be to your alcohol, tobacco, firearms, but there's a video of one of your top guys not being able to disassemble a Glock a Glock, one of the easiest to disassemble handguns in the market. Like if it had been like a 1911, like especially a 1980s or earlier production 1911, I could understand having a little bit of difficulty that way. You need a takedown wrench, and like you got to do a lot of pushing on the slide to actually get the screw out to get the top and bottom apart. But it's a Glock. You pull back the slide, you pull the two things down, slides off. I struggle with mine just because I was not a Glock guru. I bought my Glock just because it looked cool. It had Deadpool painted on it, and it's like I've been getting better at getting the slide to the point. But it's like it doesn't take a genius to be able to disassemble a Glock, and yet you got a supposed ATF firearms head who's supposed to be an expert not be able to take these apart. Now I looked at that and I'm like, so wait, I'm told what I can do with guns by a person that can't even take this apart. And I kind of applied that to the rest of the government. I'm looking at some of these senators. I'm like, wait, you're telling me I can't do that, but you're making what? Like Lindsey Graham. I am so sick of him at this point. It's like this dude has been in office since you and I have been alive. And he, yet again, Mr. Warhawk Lindsey Graham is out there with Ted Cruz and Dan Crenshaw and all these other people in Congress just waving the war banners already. Because like everybody's like, oh, Trump's going to get us in war. Trump's going to get us in war. Trump can't get us into war. We could do a police action. We could do a temporary operation to hit back if we are attacked. But we can't go fully to war unless Congress declares war.
Well,
Congress has to vote to go to war with Iran.
Yes, in order to have a declaration, but when you hold to that standard, and I agree with the standard, it kind of means that our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were illegal because there was not really, well, Iraq's a little more complicated because Congress did authorize the president to do that, which to me was them taking a back seat.
Well, they also were supposed to be folded into NATO, but
right.
NATO wasn't really there. We had some British forces, we had some Canadian forces, but we ended up being the predominant forces in those. The Canadians and the British pulled out within like 5 to 6 years of those operations. We're the ones that continued pushing into multiple different countries over a 25-year span. Right. And that's what that's why I want out of NATO. Like we're the top funder of NATO. Britain is second behind us, but then you got countries like Germany and France and Spain, all these other countries that don't have huge, standing armies and standing militaries. Why? Because us. Everybody's like, well, we don't have, they have universal health care. America doesn't have universal health care. The only reason they have that is because they don't spend what we spend on defense spending. They don't spend near amount the money we spend on our military, our intelligence, law enforcement, all that. They do not spend those money. All that money goes to the universal health care because they don't have to worry about it. Because they're in NATO. So that means the United States and Britain are going to be taking the forefront of war. Germany, I think, is finally building up its military because, Angela Merkel's, finally gone. Another lifelong politician in a country that has pushed the world into disastrous stuff.
We're going to talk so much about foreign policy, but I agree.
I mean, that's pretty much what everybody's paying attention to now.
It's very relevant right now, and I agree with most of what you're saying. Let's I'm going to play one quick commercial so people know how to support me in this platform, and then let's shift gears and talk about something a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for watching this stream here on the Fog and the Whirlwind. It really means a lot to me. Wanted to remind all of you that I don't get money from paid ads. So if you're watching on Rumble and you're getting hit with ads, or on YouTube, or see any advertised posts over on X, I'm not making a dime off of any of them. I didn't put them there. So the best way for you all to support me is to do it through my own Substack, which is thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. But even more than that, you can support me very easily for free by leaving a comment. Also, make sure that you're pressing the like button if you haven't already here on YouTube or Rumble or Odysee or X, wherever it is you're watching. Retweet it if it's on X, and share it with your friends over on YouTube and Rumble. Thank you all so much for your support. I really appreciate it. See you on the next stream. So let's talk now about something I've talked to you before about having you on to discuss, which is something that's a little bit more fun rather than the seriousness of politics, although there's obviously cultural implications connected to this. And usually whenever you and I hang out IRL, we talk about at some point something to do with graphic novels, comic books, the Marvel Universe, things like that, because you and I...
hang on.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see, if I could, yeah, see the top of that bookcase right there? I got some Transformers figures on top of there. That's Bumblebee and Optimus, the old school Optimus Primal up there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think you can see the inbox stuff on that shelf directly behind me, too. So, yeah, big time, like, I'm a good nerd and a regular nerd.
Right.
I got some stuff in the
talk a little
bit
me. I don't think you can about that, and just in terms of where you see the culture going, but also the future of this kind of stuff. It really feels at this point, and there's an amazing quote from a guy named Carl Schmidt where he says, in the end, eventually, as society is starting to decay, everything becomes political. This can include where you shop, this can include what you buy, everything. And it's getting to a point where, at this point, if someone is talking about, let's just throw out an easy example, She-Hulk, I could probably get, if they're like, oh, it's really, really good. Not just if they say I've watched it, that doesn't really tell me anything, because they may have thought it was going to be good. But if they watch it and they're like, yeah, this is really good, I can probably infer some of their beliefs about other things. For the same reason also, if they watch the most recent Captain America, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag. But I might have some ideas of where they lean on some of the race stuff. But I mean, that would lead to some follow-up questions. It's a little bit more nuanced there.
Yeah.
The question becomes, when it comes to especially the Marvel Universe, which is a really easy target, do you see them moderating the message a little bit more as they go into, what even is the new phase now? I don't know if it's phase 2 or 4 or whatever it is.
We're in like phase 6.
Okay,
now,
so do you see them as
movies?
Do you see them as toning down the woke, or do you think that they're just going to ignore their fans and say, nah, it's here to stay?
Honestly, we'll see, because if the fan reactions between Captain America 4 and the Thunderbolts showed you anything, it's showing that when you make a movie, even with kind of pseudo-obscure characters, because let's face it, like U.S. Agent, Yelena, Red Guardian, Ghost, a lot of those characters are very niche. Like you have to be like a very old, either really old school, or you have to be a fan of those characters, because those characters haven't really done much in the comics. Like you had the Thunderbolts. I want to say the last big thing with the Thunderbolts was probably 2015 or before. They've slowly been reintegrating them back into it, but they kind of got lost after the Civil War and Civil War II storylines in Marvel Comics. Because the whole idea of the Thunderbolts was originally, it was supervillains pretending to be heroes to make money. Because Citizen V was the leader, that was Baron Zemo. Then you had the Beetle. I cannot remember what his code name as the Thunderbolt was. You had the Beetle. That's a Spider-Man villain. He's a very tech guy. You had Screaming Mimi, who was Songbird in the Thunderbolts, who has not so far made an appearance in any of the movies, which I'm kind of mad at. Like, she is a member of the West Coast Avengers. She is a member of the main Avengers. She was another reformed villain. And guess who reformed her? Hawkeye. So that's another person that got flipped by Hawkeye to the good side. So completely ignore her. But at one point they were run by Norman Osborn when he stole the Iron Patriot armor, and he slowly turned them into an actual superhero group. They actually became the Dark Avengers. And another interesting storyline that is going to get completely ignored because of how badly they've handled the character was he cloned Carol Danvers and made a pseudo-evil version of her called Moonstone, who was a part of the Dark Avengers.
Let's pause. Do you think they're going to put Carol Danvers completely in the back seat?
With how bad the Marvels movie was, they either going to do a casting swap, or the characters kind of just, she'll show up occasionally.
A
but she's
casting
not going to
swap would
be.
be a big deal. She would be very mad.
Well, my whole thing is like I don't have anything personally against Brie Larson. I think she can be a good actress. The thing that failed with me was the writing for her in the one movie. Like her solo movie was bad. Like that was bad.
Yeah.
The writing in that was bad. The plot direction was bad. Just how they fit it in to the MCU was bad. Like
It
it came
didn't
out at a
have
bad
humor in
time.
it either. Marvel is known for being funny, and I didn't feel like any of the
It
jokes
was
really
very
landed.
dead. It was very deadpan. Like they tried to do your like 80s 90s humor, but they don't understand 80s 90s humor. Like
Right.
apparently they did not watch Men in Black. They did not watch, any of the comedy like Beverly Hills Cop. They did not watch any of your quintessential like action comedy movies from the 90s to kind of get a feel for what 90s comedy is. Like Rush Hour. Rush Hour is one of the best like action comedy movies from the 90s. You got Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan. Like if you can't get comedy from those two guys being in the movie, it's not a comedy. And like how you're Marvel and you don't go and watch those movies and be like, okay, that kind of joke worked, that joke worked. Let's roll that into because they tried to make the Captain Marvel movie almost like this buddy cop movie, and it wasn't a buddy cop movie. Like it felt very the plot felt very forced, and of course, as a comic book nerd, the amount of just changes. Like I'm used to them making changes for a movie. I'm used to them like making pseudo changes to a character's backstory to make it fit more of the movie style versus what fits in the comic. I get that. That's gonna happen. Like there's stuff that works in the comics that's not gonna work in movies. There's not. But the whole thing that they changed her entire plot of how she got her powers, how she was using her powers, who she even was in the first place. Like people forget, like yeah, she was a pilot, but when we're introduced to her in the comics, she's a lieutenant in the United States Air Force Security Office. Like her whole purpose was to protect scientific field offices for the U.S. Air Force, and she meets Captain Marvel, who is undercover as a Kree science officer whose mission was to sabotage Earth's science endeavors and prevent us from being able to detect the Kree, because the Kree wanted to come into Earth and take Earth over because the Skrulls were already on Earth. Like
Right.
the whole thing was the Skrulls and the Kree hate each other,
Well,
and
talk for a
there was
second
a
about how they portrayed the scrolls. I mean,
oh
that was
they're
weird.
my favorite alien villain faction, and Secret Invasion is one of the greatest Marvel comic book like big events ever. And how the movie did a worse job than the old Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes TV show for children did. Like you get on Disney Plus and go watch Earth's Mightiest Heroes second season, because the second season is basically all the Secret Invasion storyline. That thing had to have less than the budget of a single Marvel project ever now,
Definitely.
and yet that cartoon within like 20 15 to 20 episodes did a better retelling of Secret Invasion from the comics than any of this TV show or movie stuff has did. The Super Scrolls, like I'm sorry, I like Amelia Clark. I was a big Game of Thrones person. I read the books. I've been watching House of the Dragon, the prequel thing, and I like Amelia Clark. But her character, when they turn her into a Super Scroll in the Nick Fury Secret Invasion TV show, was just bad. The CGI was bad. The acting was bad. The effects were everything was bad. And how we can go back to 2013 or even further, go back to 2008, Michael Bay's Transformers movie, his very first Transformers movie. How that movie has better CGI now versus what not just Marvel, any company, big companies giving us with CGI now. And my favorite movie from 2013 was Pacific Rim. And
Let's
that
go.
CGI
Let's
looks
go.
like the CGI we're supposed to have now
Yeah.
over 10 years ago. It's been 12 years since that movie came out.
Hard to
And I can
believe.
go rewatch that movie,
Yeah.
and I could watch it with someone who's never seen it before, and they're thinking it's something that came out within the last 4 years.
Oh, it looks
No, it
awesome.
came out 12 years ago.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I love that movie. And the first Transformers movie, the CGI, I agree. It was really good.
Like they fried an entire computer server with the second movie for just Devastator. They said the files for Devastator were so big for just the individual pieces that combined to form Devastator in the second Transformers movie, they burned out an entire server stack trying to put that together for the post production of the movie. That's how
Wow.
dedicated the CGI was and how new that CGI technology was. Now it's the reverse. You hear stories about, well, I was a CGI artist. They underpaid me. I was working 30 plus hours a week, and this movie's still crap
Let's
because they want to get, instead of postponing movies, instead of pushing movies back, we're in the post COVID era of movies. So a lot of these movies are coming out 2 to 4 years late compared to when they were originally supposed to come out, and they're still bad. Like, I watched Captain America 4. That had some decent CGI because they took the time to do some reshoots. They took some time to fix it. And I think Thunderbolts is the same way. From what I've seen of Thunderbolts, the CGI for like Ghost and Taskmaster stuff were very good. Sentry was like considered the best part of the movie, and his CGI was so good. So when you take the time to go back and just finish a project, you get good fan reaction. There's still going to be some nitpicky because we're comic book fans. We're going to nitpick everything because if something was not done to the nth degree of how it was in the comic, we're going to riot sometimes. Like that's just who we are as fans. We're that passionate about our stories, about our characters.
right.
And I'm looking at the stuff for James Gunn's upcoming Superman movie.
Right.
I've never been this excited for a superhero movie, let alone a Superman movie, in years.
Well,
I
sure.
did not like Man of Steel. I
Well,
did not like that
talk.
movie.
Let's talk a little bit about DC. Again, I want to talk about Hollywood briefly, and then we'll talk more about specifically the written form content. I mean, how do you get the sense that James Gunn is listening to people's criticisms of they often call it the Snyderverse, or do you get the attention that he doesn't necessarily listen to those arguments about why that was bad, but he is truly trying to go do his own thing?
He's trying. Not only is he trying to do his own thing, he's trying to appease like actual comic book fans, while trying to get an audience of non-comic book people in. Everybody knows Superman. You do not have to read a comic to know who Superman was. He's been around since the 1920s. He's the quintessential American superhero, even outside of Captain America, because he was Superman was before Captain America. Captain America came out in the 30s, leading up to World War II. So Superman is a embodiment of America, the red, white, and blue, truth, justice, the American way. That was Superman's thing since the 20s. And James Gunn has tapped into that, I feel like, with this Superman. The suit is the correct colors, it's the correct design. Everybody's like, oh, he's got trunks. Superman wore trunks for over 40 years. Like,
You
people
either
don't
like it,
realize
you
that.
don't, or you appreciate the fact that that's the original suit, or you don't. I have
Yeah.
no problem with it.
Yeah, it's like, well, the whole thing is like you and I grew up in the 2000s. We had Justice League and Justice League Unlimited as our two big introductions, and Superman the Animated Series. You had the Superman the Animated Series in the 90s. Then you had 2002 to 2003 was Justice League, and then 2005 to like 2006, or might be a little bit further, like 2008, we had Justice League Unlimited. And in every episode, Superman's got the royal blue, he's got the bright red, he's got the trunks.
Tim
Like,
Daly, man,
and
and George
and
Newbern, love it.
your favorite Superman movie, All Star Superman, he's in the trunks
Yeah,
in that entire movie. Like
dude.
every animated movie, for the most part, has had Superman in the trunks. It was only until like 2015, 2017 in the comics when they did DC Rebirth after
Right.
the Flashpoint paradox crap that they stopped drawing Superman a lot with the trunks. He went to the one piece bodysuit with the symbol, and it's all right depending on who's drawing it. But the whole thing with me was Snyder. The suit for the Snyder movies didn't feel like Superman's suit. It wasn't a bright blue. It was a very muted blue, which is not Superman. The whole point of Superman is he is the bright symbol of hope. You see him speeding through the air, and it's like, that's Superman! It's like Batman's the dark and brooding. He's the guy hiding in the shadows with the dark grays, the dark blues, the purple gloves, which we won't talk about from the original Batman comics. The bright purple gloves with the dark gray and black, like that was comedic. But the whole thing is like Superman. He's the goody two shoes. He's the Boy Scout, to quote Batman from the comics. Batman's the dark and brooding, hammer of justice, and Superman's the hope. That was the contrast between the characters. I went back and watched Man of Steel. You don't get any of that from the Snyder movies. Like, you don't get any of the shining beacon of hope from Superman in the Snyder movies. And maybe he would have introduced that later on if he had other movies.
I don't know. It's hard to say, man. I feel like they were trying to do it. It's just the way that it was done wasn't good, because he has those discussions with people whenever he talks to Lois Lane and says, it's not a S on my world, it means hope. So he is trying to push the idea of it being hope. But I agree with you that sort of mixed messages, because to me, hope and light and bright colors go very well together. And the way they were doing it, we're going to have, like you said, kind of like a very dark, I don't even know if I'd call it navy because it was so dark, suit, like I guess a navy suit. And overall, just a very dark, sad way of doing it. Like when they killed his dad, Kevin Costner's character.
That scene irritates me as an adult. As a teenager who wasn't really into comics anymore, and then when I got back into comics after that movie came, around the time that movie came out, that irritated me.
Sure.
Because the whole thing is he's waving him off because he doesn't want him to expose his powers to save him. I'm like, he can fly as fast he's so fast he can be a blur. And you're telling me that he couldn't have just super flew, grabbed him, put his dad somewhere else, and then, magically appeared back in the crowd, and then the dad walk up is like, Superman saved me.
That's the problem.
Because Superman existed. Like, he was already Superman at that point.
That's what the comic Superman would have done.
Yeah.
Like,
the comic Superman would have, like, disappeared, pulled his clothes off, Superman suit, done his little spinneroonie change, flew, grabbed his dad, put him back in the crowd, be like, there you go, Mr. Kent, sorry about your farm, and flew right off. Or he would have fought the freaking hurricane. If we're talking about, like, old school, he would have fought the tornado. Like, he would have done a spin around the tornado and reversed the tornado if we're talking, like, old school comics Superman. Yep. I mean, we're talking about a Superman that in, what was it, the third or fourth movie with Christopher Reeve flew around the Earth the opposite way to spin back, to reverse time.
Right.
Like, I mean, come on. Like, the character is done very comedic, very, like, like, you couldn't really do that feats. And the fact that Snyder's like, nah, I'm going to take this character and, ground him, but still make him a godlike being, but he's going to be more human. But the whole idea is he's more human than God. Like, everybody's like, Superman's a godlike being. He's indestructible. Kryptonite and magic are the only thing that hurts him. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. He has godlike powers. He's basically unkillable unless you're within. You have to be in a red sun, you have to have kryptonite, or you have to have magic. Those are the only three things that can really hurt Superman. But the whole idea is he's more human than Batman. He sees the good in humanity. He wants to be a part of us. He wants to be human while having his powers. Whereas Batman is, I'm going to use my father's money to punish criminals. I'm going to punish the corrupt. I'm going to do this. Whereas Superman's like, I see the bad that humanity does, but I'm also a part of the good of humanity. So I'm going to be the shining beacon of hope that is there, and when you need it. Because everybody's like, Superman's boring. You have an entire comic where he's just going around doing mediocre tasks. He's pulling cats out of trees. That's Superman. He's a community-based superhero. He will do even the most mediocre task if it means it's helping someone in his community. Whereas, like Batman, like some of the other heroes, they're only there when the crime's there. Superman's there if you have a bad day. Like, there's multiple times where he's talked people out of suicide or just helped them have a better day because they were feeling bad. That's what the whole entire point of Superman is. And Snyder just took that and said, we don't need that. I want dark and gritty. Like, we don't need that side.
It's sad because I really think Cavill could have done it. I think that if the writing was there and everything else, Cavill, when you just look at how he seems to be in real life, he could have been that lighthearted and, like you said, the way you're describing this character, which is the comic accurate version, but it wasn't. So I would love to keep going on, but we're hitting time here. We're at 1:15, which is where we wanted to keep it. But I'm going to have you back on, and we'll have to keep talking for a longer segment about the comic stuff. Maybe we can focus a little bit more on Batman and some of the other stuff. But as we wrap up the show for today, what all do you want to plug? Do you want to talk about some of the stuff you put on Instagram, or how can people find you?
I mean, I haven't really been posting on Instagram. Now that I'm in a permanent residence, I'm going to go through, I think, in the next couple months, and I actually file my paperwork for a oh dang it, what is it? The FFL. I'm going to finally go through and like get my FFL, and I'll get my Instagram for the gun related stuff back up and running. Right now it's just my personal stuff and my martial arts, but I haven't posted on that in months. But yeah, once I get the FFL paperwork and all that submitted, I'll reboot the gun side of my Instagram and start posting more there. And then I can plug it then, because I completely got rid of those posts and stuff, because since I didn't have my paperwork at all, I was just worried about posting some of the gun stuff I was doing on there. I didn't want to get in trouble, and plus.
Sure.
Instagram has not been the friendliest toward gun content. They've gotten better, surprisingly, because they're under Facebook now. It's like they were worse when they weren't under Facebook's ownership. So it's like somehow under Meta, they've gotten looser on the 2A stuff, which is good, but it's like it was surprising. I might start doing stuff on YouTube. Like I might try to start filming like range days and stuff for YouTube. I've considered it. I'm not sure. I don't go to the range enough right now. I just found another local range that I'm going to start going to. It's a little bit less of a drive to get to. So I might do some videos, especially with what I got now. I've got some new guns and stuff that I haven't shown off yet.
Okay. Cool. Well, if you're good with people following you on your current Instagram, I'll put that in the description.
Yeah, you can go and put that in the description. That is a long name.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, they can look you up. It's no big deal. If they can type in the Fog and the Whirlwind to let me up on Facebook, they can type in Taekwondo Cowboy.
That is true. That is true.
All right. Well, thanks so much. It's been great as always. I appreciate you coming on and informing the audience about everything we've talked about. I wanted to end on something more fun, and we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, definitely.